So welcome to Women in Digital. I'm Carmen and I'm sat here today with Alice. I'd like you to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Alice Kershaw. I'm the Head of Digital Transformation at the Wildlife Trust. So I work on behalf of the Wildlife Trust Federation.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I was thinking the same to you earlier as well, that we've had a couple of conversations now, and each time I genuinely find it so interesting, everything you've got to share and the work that you do as well. Do you mind going into a little bit about that, please, and sort of what you do in your role?
Yeah, of course. So I work for the central body of the Wildlife Trust Federation. So we are a group of 46 fiercely independent charities who cover the UK and Crown dependencies. So wherever you are in the UK, there is a Wildlife Trust near you. We have nearly 1 million members across those trusts. We have 40,000 volunteers. We manage more nature reserves than there are McDonald's. In fact, I have to keep checking because McDonald's keep building more, but we keep buying more. So we're, it's a proper arms race.
Fantastic.
But as our chief exec said, we have more reserves than our train stations. So huge amount of land. We manage a huge amount of land in the UK. We also campaign for policy change and manage visitor centres, run education programmes, help communities make the most of their area for nature. So there's a huge variety of things that we do at the Wildlife Trust Federation.
And how did you get into this?
So I have had a career this is where I'm kind of going, do I do the version that I say in interviews, which is like managing really complex high-risk projects, or do I do the version which is the reality, which is I've never wanted a boring job. I've always wanted to do something really interesting, and I've always had the massive privilege of being able to work for really great organisations. But a lot of what I've done is new roles. So someone wants to solve a problem or respond to an opportunity that's to do with people, processes, and probably a bit of digital technology. They don't quite know what the answer is, but they want to deliver something that really responds to those kind of needs. It's quite complex. They're not really sure. They might not have a budget. They probably don't have a team. They just want to bring in someone to start to look at that. And that's been a little bit of a pattern of my career. And about 3.5 years ago, about 4 years ago, in fact, I saw this job advertised at the Wildlife Trust, which is an organisation I've always been hugely impressed by. They do so much stuff. And I knew this already. I'd kind of come across them a lot. But the job was to look at digital in the Wildlife Trust movement. I was like, well, that's pretty cool. That's fun. I like working complexity. I've brought in new teams before. I've dealt with a lot of different tech, and I've worked in a kind of heritage sector. So knew a little bit about them and how it worked. So ended up working there. And do you want me to talk a bit about what I kind of cover in my role?
I would love that. Yes, please.
So in terms of what I do day to day, I do a real mix of like strategy. So how do we deliver our 2030 strategy to bring nature back? I'm responsible for coordinating what's called Transformation 4, which is root and branch digital transformation, which is great, nice ecological metaphor. I think that's important for anything we do. But effectively what that means is looking at how do we create a digital culture that supports wildlife trusts? And this is digital around making sure that people are equipped with the right software and hardware. They've got strategies. They've thought about it. We've thought about what do we actually need here at the Federation? How do we support that with services that we deliver? How do we support it with things that other trusts are doing that are really interesting? And we can kind of scale from it. So we have that. We also look at how we upskill people in digital and tech. There's no point having great tech if you can't use it. And making them confident to kind of work out what they need, test and learn, try new things out, all of that good stuff that creates digital culture. And then kind of underpinning a lot of that is about being more impactful with our data. How do we bring data together at scale? How do we use it to model our impact, check if what we're doing is the right things? All of that stuff as well. So, but doing it at scale, UK wide. So that's effectively what we do. I have a very small team. I have 4 people in my team plus me. Looking at a whole variety of projects, like I say, on behalf of the Federation. But it's probably worth saying I work with loads of people from across the Federation as well. It's not just me and my team. We co-create all this stuff with people from every trust. It's fantastic. It's so great for me to be working somewhere with so much kind of skill, innovation, values-driven, like real experts. So we're a small team, but there's a lot that we can work with.
And working with the right people as well makes a big difference.
It makes a huge difference. I'm really, really lucky. I don't think I've ever worked in such an expert organisation of like people who really know what they're doing, and it's great.
I think as well, we spoke about earlier briefly AI, and you post really strong articles on LinkedIn about your thoughts around AI. What impact are you seeing in your industry?
So I think in terms of AI, what I find interesting is that, and why I originally found it interesting, is that the Wildlife Trust, we have been doing stuff with machine learning and AI for quite a long time, like predating ChatGPT. We have things like Mammal Web, where you can ID individual species on camera traps that has AI in it. Surrey's Space for Nature project, which is condition of habitats in Surrey, using Earth observation data, once again, and citizen science. We have acoustic monitoring, we have eDNA, we have all kinds of things that have been using machine learning, often in partnership. It's fair to say it's not always us on our own, but we have this quite strong kind of history of using technology well, and still those projects are still going. But before the big kind of ChatGPT craze around it. But now we have extra things we can do. We are trying to solve knotty, complex project problems. And, how do we do this? We need every tool available if it's useful, and we're often kind of single points of expertise teams. So we were talking earlier about using ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot for coding and code review, because you are very unlikely to have a lot of developers in a wildlife trust. Some do. We do have trusts that have teams of developers. It's rare. So you've probably got at best one person doing it side of the desk on their own. They might need to learn how to code with R, or they might know a bit of R or Python, have to do it. You haven't got anyone to necessarily bounce that idea off. That's where it's really handy. But we've also seen across the Federation ideas of using AI for things like image generation. If you're putting in a funding bid and you want to show what something's going to look like in 20, 150 years, and you haven't got time to get someone to help you with that, you might use it. That's been done in Warwickshire. In fact, there's a case study on CAST website about that specific use. There's also ones where it's been used to kind of generate... I'd say it's more in the kind of code metadata tagging kind of side of it. You don't see a lot of content generation. There are real concerns, it's probably worth saying, and won't be a surprise to anyone, around the kind of environmental impact of it. It is a particularly energy intensive and data center intensive technology. So it's one we've really tried to make sure when we're using it in a kind of very... It has to really add value to us in order to use it. Although there are trusts experimenting, like deep research usage, things like that. It is really valuable. So there's a real mix of different kind of approaches across the Federation. But the focus for me has been making sure it fits our values, ethics, and we have guidelines, guardrails. We've got wiki pages on our intranet about it. We do training on AI. We do talking to people about, how does it fit into our idea around ethics or EDI or sustainability or, how we do our HR practices. What do we need to think about? Because we are so values driven as a charity, and we know there's a big trust in us as real life grassroots on the ground organisations. That's our USP. That's the opposite of AI. We are the bit that AI cannot replicate. And that makes using that really interesting because it adds something we don't have. But it also means that it can come into real tension with our values, and that's where we work to kind of provide a bit of kind of emotional safety around it as well. Around experimenting and using it.
When you mentioned earlier your woolly hats and your fleece, you are literally on the ground.
We are literally on the ground. I was saying, when you start at the Royal Society, you get given a fleece. Because a lot of our work is, by the very nature of it, I'm working in an organisation where most people get in the Wildlife Trust because they like working outside, on the ground, with people, with nature, in habitats. They're not necessarily working the Wildlife Trust. Some people do, but they're not necessarily working there because they really want to be inside all day. It's not how it works. And a lot of the tech we look at is things around kind of monitoring and understanding what actions people are taking, all that kind of good stuff. So it makes a lot of sense. But it also, we have great tablets in use in different parts of the UK, things like that, to help do all that kind of monitoring good stuff. But it is definitely a very on the ground, very in real life, in your local area kind of an organisation.
You're seeing it.
Yeah, exactly. You're out there, you're experiencing it, you're seeing it. And that comes into a bit of conflict with some of the ideas about digital today and how it could be used. It's not about a virtual experience replacing a real one. It's about being in your communities. But we also know we have great digital volunteers, for example, in some cases. So we want people to be able to engage with us in any way that they can. And that may be digital, but we do know, we manage land. That's a big thing of what we do.
How do people get involved if they want to volunteer?
So there is, if you go to your local Wildlife Trust page, there'll be one on volunteering. There'll be one on there and have a little look. So we don't tend to take a lot of volunteers at the Royal Society, which is the main one that I work for. But every local Wildlife Trust will take volunteers. So have a look. They're often very popular. I have to say, they're very popular slots. Because super fun, really interesting work in your local group. But do go and have a look on there.
Yeah, absolutely will. And I like how you talk about the values and the people and also AI in a way that the pros and cons of it as well. I think that's something that we've done personally at Nimble over the last probably 9, 10, even longer now, months. We've been on our own journey, and there's some great that's come from it with AI-driven development. And I mean, the results are phenomenal, 40% accelerated delivery. Nice. But also there's some things that we've learned along the way, and we are still learning. It's forever changing. There's something new every day. Nigel, our CTO, always shares something new daily that he's seen, and it's hard to keep up with, isn't it? So how do you find trying to keep up with it? Because there's so much every day.
I was just thinking, I was like, that's so impressive. I'm on a lot of newsletters, which is not great for my carbon footprint. Delete them straight away when you get them, if you get a newsletter and you don't want it. But yeah, trying to really keep up with it is one of the issues. I think it's the pace of change and the acceleration of change, or perception of change. Yeah. And in a way, it actually doesn't matter, because keeping up with either of those things is the same.
Yes.
But is a real thing that it's kind of it's in our strategy a little bit around kind of horizon scanning.
Okay.
But it's almost the horizon's got very short. This is something when I start to think about, like, as part of our strategy refresh, we've been talking, our strategy takes us to 2030. So. And I'm like, even that horizon, like when we put our strategy together about 3 years ago, that was before AI was so in the mainstream. And then you think since then to where I've got to now, and I'm just kind of like, whew, like trying to predict. I was put on the spot in a strategy meeting like last week of like, well, where do you think we'll be with AI or whatever in 2040? And I was like, I have no idea. Like, not a chance. The pace of acceleration is so huge. So it's talking to other people a lot. It's like keeping on the ground with like other people doing my kind of job.
Okay.
Being parts of a network. So WWF, the pandas, not the wrestlers, do important distinction. Do like networks and groupings. CAST, who are a kind of umbrella organisation for tech in the charity sector and third sector, they do quite a lot of networks. So it's like AI leaders networks, innovation for impact networks. It's a lot of talking to each other.
Like communities there.
Absolutely, it's so vital. What are you doing? What case studies are you working on? Could you share that idea?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that's really valuable, as well as like lots of newsletters, like things like Blood in the Machine. And I'm trying to think of any of the other ones, but I tend to listen like read ones like Ed Zitron's newsletter is quite good, but that's mainly a rant. But there's all kinds of like interesting newsletters you get on. Like Catalyst is another one, Public Digital, like people who are doing stuff in that space.
Absolutely,
But even then, like putting the time aside to kind of actually like look at it and take it in, and what does that mean for us at the Wildlife Trust is the question in my head. That could be super interesting. Is it actually 404 Media is another one that I'd say, which is more the kind of darker side of some of this stuff, but they're really interesting. But just keeping an eye on like, what's actually happening out there. But the networks where you're talking to real people are unsurprisingly some of the better ones, because you're seeing it in the context of like what experiments happening, who's leading on it, where are you recording that, how are you rolling out things like Copilot and Teams Premium, and how are you coping with AI that's just coming in without you asking for it. So AI note takers in meetings you didn't invite in, or AI that's kind of in software that you're using that you didn't turn on but it's there. How do you deal with that as well?
It's an interesting side of it, is like the policy around the security side of AI as well is a big element that needs to be considered. Yeah,
it's erring on the side of, I mean, with some stuff like Copilot, obviously Microsoft Copilot, it's all locked down, it's locked to your tenant, all that kind of stuff. Even then, you can do some errors with that, depending on how the rest of your files sound. This is not exciting digital transformation talk, people, but basically, kind of erring on the side of, if in doubt, don't put anything in any of these that you wouldn't want to see on Google. But like, that's not great. I mean, I will just say AI has not made my job easier. People are already afraid of tech. Accelerating it rapidly with things that no one really knows or isn't in the public domain. How it works, what its environmental impact is, the impact on us, what it's trained on. There's never been so much tech with so little documentation, and I'm like, that's not great for trying to get people more comfortable with technology. That's all I'll say for that one. It's like some people have really embraced it, and you can see when people like ask ChatGPT on their phone, of like ask it a question or play with it or do things, and other people are really not, and there's that kind of repellent almost feeling about it. It's like they're beyond skeptical. They're actively repulsed by it. So thanks guys for doing that.
I think it's using it as an asset, isn't it, to aid you as a tool, as opposed to using it, I suppose, to do your job day to day. Is looking at how it can enhance certain those repetitive tasks, as opposed to trusting it to do all of that, and the human in the loop is definitely an approach that we like to use. That's definitely better.
Yeah, exactly that. Yes.
Talking of exciting digital transformation and your strategy.
Yeah.
For this next year, would you like to tell us more about that?
Yeah, so for the next year with digital, we're really focusing on kind of a couple of key areas.
Okay.
So we're looking at what we call our data service. So this is the first time we've been able to provide for the Wildlife Trust Federation a platform which brings together kind of our spatial data on like habitats, reserves we manage, land management advice we're giving, that kind of thing, with data on people. So bringing together our kind of customer relationship management stuff of like, well, where are we? Where do we have members?
Yeah.
Where do we have volunteers? What are they doing? What are they working on? What kind of actions are people taking for nature? And really starting to pull that together. So we've got something called the CAN app, which is all about like people recording where they're doing activities, and that feeds into our data service, which is a data lake. Which, by the way, if you ever work for an environmental charity, don't use phrases like data lake, because people will tell you how it doesn't work, how a lake works, which is true. But
to see the confusion.
Yes, it's not great in terms of like phrasing that gets you. So it's a data service that we have built on a data lake, just for those who are interested in the technical side of it. But bringing together things like member data, but also, images, recordings. We can bring together all kinds of different types of data and then surface that out back to the Federation. So that's a really big part of how do we understand what we're doing at scale? We're so locally based, so we have to be able to like clip our data to really small resolution right up to UK, and it kind of starts to show the breadth of what we do when you have to do that. So what's going on in your local area, what's going on in your local reserve, what's how is that shared across like corridors and landscape scale areas or river catchments, or all these different things.
So much, isn't there?
There's a lot of different ways we need to cut the data, and as soon as we start doing that, you realise like what we're dealing with complexity wise, but it's super important, so mapping out how close are people to our reserves. So the majority of people in England are within for example, like half an hour drive, and I'm not suggesting you drive, but it was one of the stats we worked out earlier, of a reserve. But then there's a huge, like millions of people are within 15 minutes walk of one of our reserves. So like when you start to look like who's the local audience for this stuff, that kind of data is really important. Anyway, just to give one example, so the data service is a big one. Another one is looking at how we scale innovation from the Federation. Like when I first started in my job, I thought there's going to be brilliant innovation here. There is bound to be. We've got 46 different trusts, brilliant people working on the same strategy in different contexts. I could not think of a better way to get innovation. And it's true, there's some amazing stuff. But no one's got time to share what they're doing with other trusts. It's not will, they happily will. We do show and tells as part of our delivery group meetings. Where
it's not as connected.
No, well, they're really focused on their own area. We run lean. We don't have like a lot of time to be writing out case studies or necessarily like recording what we're doing. So getting a little bit of time and space and resource to support trusts to actually do that. So we've got trusts that have done some great work on in-field recording. So how do they do in-field recording with tablets? What are they using? What are they going out with? Does this tablet still work when you accidentally drop it in a river? Important considerations, that you don't want another trust to have to rediscover. So, and things like what fields are you using in your recording app that really work for you, that people have tested, and things like how do you monitor on reserves when there's no signal? Like, if there's no signal and power on reserves, we do have solutions. There's a great project in Somerset called the Digital Reserve Project. And that's scaled to Gwent now because they've been able to go, here's what we're doing. It's Raspberry Pi enabled stuff. You can stick it out there. It lasts for ages, and it does little like 10-second views of the reserve. That's enough to monitor on, and it's really low cost, low maintenance, those kind of things. So finding that stuff, working out where we can scale it, because it doesn't always have to be us in the kind of central charity that does it. It's great if we can find someone else doing it and do that. So that's a big priority as well, along with obviously thinking about AI, looking for like partners and working with partners on, because we don't have the compute power, we don't have the machine learning skills, we've got a lot of enthusiasm and we can test stuff for real on the ground, but we're basically looking at a couple of academic partners we might look at for the kind of big use of AI. We've done the work on what we can't do already, what would actually be super valuable, because there's loads of stuff like the wish list of what it could do is monstrous. The list of what we can actually action if we do it is smaller. So starting to look at partners for that and really working through what that might mean. So that's quite a big priority as well. So in terms of what we're looking at, and our strategy midpoint review, so we're looking at what's changed in the last 3 years and what does that mean for our strategy in the next 5 years, and that's like I say, for digital, I think that is really, really difficult.
A lot of change in that time.
There's so much. I don't think, I mean, it's not slowing down anytime soon, is it?
No, not at all. No, not at all. It must be exciting for people to have that time to look at what's innovative and what can they do in those changes as well. I think for yourself not to have to duplicate everything. You might have to for some things now, but over time, if that can be changed, that'll definitely help you and the teams as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's all like, don't reinvent the wheel is a big phrase that my line manager says a lot. It's like, we don't need to. We've like, if someone's doing something great, let's point at them and work out a way to find out how everyone else can replicate that.
And you spoke about digital maturity as well. Would you mind telling us a bit about that?
Yeah, so we've got, because we're dealing with, like, on a day-to-day basis, the Federation is made up of real big variety of, like, trust size, like, makeup, whether or not they're a coastal trust or a land trust or they're an island or they're a country, you know, so it's all different kinds of scale. We all work together, a bit like a murmuration of starlings. We all move in the same direction. The metaphor fails when you think that actually what I was trying to get at is they're different sizes, murmuration of different sized birds. But basically, the whole federation is made up of people at very different levels. I don't always love the phrase digital maturity. Sometimes when I have a slide deck of like how I talk about digital, and it's sometimes like digital savvy, basically, because maturity can feel a bit like, oh, there's something just a little bit
that wording,
like, oh, you're immature about it. It's not necessarily true. You just might not have had time to prioritise it. You might be really on it with what you should be doing, or like aware of it. In fact, most trusts are pretty on it, but they just haven't had the time to think about it. So what we're looking at is how do we make sure that we have a maturity kind of framework, maturity approach that enables all trusts, whatever size, whatever capacity, to get to a foundational level to deliver the strategy. So it's about them being fit for purpose for themselves and their kind of operating model about how they work. But fundamentally, what do they need to have in place in order for us to collectively deliver the 2030 strategy to bring nature back? And that is where we're currently working on. So I've got the advisory group who work with me made of fantastic digital trustees from different trusts. They all have their own trustees. So we have 650 trustees across the Federation, of which there's maybe a dozen who are really, really on it. Digital trustees, happy days. It's brilliant for the trust. It's great for me. So finding those people who can support me with thinking about this stuff, and digital directors, people with like digital interest who are chief execs, you know, coming together and kind of co-creating this of like what do we need, and it goes from foundations level of like, this is where we want all trusts to get to, we all support all trusts to get to with our strategy, right through to, in some elements, some trusts are going to want to pioneer. So they're where you want to, that's great. We can flag you as like real pioneering trust, feeds back into that project. I said earlier about we'll share your innovations, we'll try and work out a mechanism. So, you know, you get some benefit from doing that as well. TBD, project's still going. Any suggestions? But basically, that's how it kind of all ties in together with the idea that we all collectively work together to get to one level, and then trust may decide to move up, and some of them will already be above that level, so they can assess themselves and go, right, we don't need to focus on, say, cybersecurity, because we already follow, there's a collective framework for cybersecurity, they're ticking everything off on that, don't need to worry about that. But you might say, well, actually, we're lacking a bit of kind of geospatial knowledge. Actually, we could do with having more mapping kind of resource in-house when we look at how we score there, considering what we want to do. So that's the point of it. It's meant to be based in something you can then turn into an action plan, rather than just kind of go, oh, that was nice. You know?
It's actually having that input and I suppose bouncing ideas off one another.
Exactly.
And then having an action from that, as opposed to just talking about it. Actually making that change and doing something with it.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't have, you know, no business, no organisation has time to sit around and talk about it. We definitely don't have time to sit around and talk about it. So it's what can you do in tomorrow? And what can you learn from someone else, or what can you buy off the shelf, or you know, what's already there in that offer? You can just be like, right, we need that. Where do we get it from? Get that thing, plug it in, get on with delivery. That's what we want to see.
One thing, obviously, you spoke about previously and in your day-to-day is digital transformation. I'd be keen to hear, I suppose, from yourself what that means to you day-to-day.
So, day-to-day, it's a lot of culture focus. So digital transformation is obviously also about technology. It's about making sure that our pipelines are running, everything's automated, and it's easy. But day to day, what it should mean is you don't think about the tech when you're doing your job. I would love it. You don't know the name of what you're using. You just turn up in the morning, you open your computer, it tells you what you need to do. It's prompting everything seamlessly. You look at whatever, like a dashboard which shows you what's going on in your world. You move through to immediately add value by not having to do faffy admin stuff, unless you love doing faffy admin stuff. But if you don't, move straight through to adding value in your job by using your actual expertise and the things that matter. So my definition is digital transformation is basically helping people do the things that matter. That's the point. It's all about that. And I love the Tom Loosemore quote about, you know, it's not just about, well, it's about using the kind of processes of the internet era to help respond to people's raised expectations. But it's interesting because I had a discussion with our advisory group recently, and they were like, are we still in the internet era? Is it something else? So I think that shift in digital transformation of like, it's no longer just like we're getting up to the internet era, or kind of like how do we respond to this current age where tech is so all pervasive. It is everywhere. How do we leverage that for the work we're trying to do that matters? That's the thing. It should be seamless. It should be straightforward. I'm saying this as if like I should have started this with, we haven't got there. Like I haven't got the answer. But there's something about like making it more invisible to us and not having that like grit between systems. Everything's interoperable. We use the systems to their max and we know how they work, all that kind of stuff. We know what we should have invested in, and we know what we're investing in the future. You know, it meets our values. We're comfortable using it. We don't worry about it, all that kind of stuff. It's to make it much more invisible. I think at the point where you're aware of like, so for example, in previous roles, it's always the expense system or like finance system that people don't like.
Absolutely.
And they will name it. They will say, I have to go on whatever it is and use that. You don't tend to say that when you're like opening a project plan in Microsoft Word. It's very rare someone goes, I'm going to go and open Microsoft Word. Like it's really odd. That would seem so jarring. So like you want to get to that point where people are like, I'm going to open the project plan. I'm going to file my expenses. They say the thing. They don't go, I'm going to open whatever god awful title software this is that I'm going to use. And there's something for me about digital transformation, which is that, but also bringing in that kind of agile mindset, which is often people just kind of, oh, agile, but it's like, it's brilliant. You're testing it in real life and learning from it and getting that feedback mechanism. And if it doesn't work, you haven't invested too much time. That's great. That is really valuable. And we do that already at the Wildlife Trust. We're really good at testing stuff out, getting real feedback, see if it works. We don't call it agile necessarily, but that's brilliant. It gives us something to work on. But it's that too. It's like that openness, that transparency. You know, so in your ideal working day, you want to know what another team's doing. You can find out really clearly. You can see what they've just done. You can tell what they're working on. You can see where it links to your work, and you know if that's worked, what they've learned, all that kind of stuff, really straightforwardly, without having to like mess around and find it. So you can get that learning straight away and be like, right, I was going to do that kind of project, but I can see I need to add in this or whatever, and then be able to just get on with it. So that's the kind of transformation will have worked when you kind of get to that point, I think.
It's thank you for sharing that. It's interesting that you mentioned finance. That was for us one of the first areas that we tackled internally at Nimble. There's repetitive tasks. Expenses being one of them. Quite a strenuous one, and now it's so much quicker. And an easy process compared to how it was before. So that was definitely the first one.
That was definitely the real feeling. But I think that's the point, isn't it? It's like I've had my background prior to this role involved quite a lot of business process review and engineering. And a lot of that, I mean, I've spent a long time going through what people's processes are and like down to the minute, and you draw the maps on Visio and it's beautiful and everyone's very excited about this. And then the proxy for that is you just ask someone, what's a pain in your day? What's really annoying? That's the exact, like, don't waste time. Ask people what the pain points are. They know.
Straight to the point.
And they'll go, if like 10 people have told you it's the expenses system, you might want to think about that, because that's going to give you your benefits, like, plan, because you're going to save those people a lot of time, you know, and it might not be that, it might be something else, but that's always, like, people know what isn't working with their tech. Like, it's not a secret most of the time. If something isn't speaking something else, you know, you'll know, they know.
And I saw, talking about community and sort of bouncing ideas off one another, that you were at an event, was it last month in Manchester on AI? You attended. Yes. With
our chief exec.
Yes. How was that?
Yeah, that was interesting. So that was, we were being shown around. So it wasn't an event per se. It was talking to the Manchester Business School AI Observatory.
That's the one.
Yeah. So I put some great, deeply flattering photos of myself on on LinkedIn wearing the special goggles. But
I saw.
It was great fun. So we were looking at the AI Observatory, which effectively, I think it's, I'm going to get the information wrong, I think it's 72 large screens that basically run models, like digital twin models of cities and places. So we were looking at how that worked, you know, what can they model on those systems, and you can do walkthroughs, fly-throughs, you can make it 3D. And this is another one where you kind of go, well, that's a fun day out for you. Which it was really interesting. But the point of looking at that is because we do things like manage land or deal with landscapes, how do you model a landscape in 3D so you can see how interventions might work on that landscape? So what happens if we change where trees are planted, where rivers flow, where people are walking on a landscape?
Yeah.
At the moment, that would be quite a lot of, we could go back to the research, we could go back to the evidence, we could have a go at guessing that. Wouldn't it be great to be able to walk through that landscape and be like, I can experience it? Are there any barriers? Does it feel safe?
Visual, isn't it? Yeah.
How does this work? How does it work if you're up in the canopy? Does it give you a different, literal bird's eye view of this space?
Of course.
What does that look like for creatures in it? So, and we haven't got that far yet, but it was just starting those processes. This is the horizon scanning stuff of okay, how could AI really work for us with a potential partnership or something else that would allow us to really visualize these landscapes at scale.
Absolutely.
For example, we're recently trying to acquire the whole of the Rothbury estate in Northumberland.
Okay.
It's so do go on our website, have a look at that. Anyone, give us some donations to acquire that.
Yeah.
Because that is one of the largest land acquisitions to come into public kind of. The ability for anyone that's not the Duke of Northumberland to buy it in the last 100 years. It's hugely important, but it's a huge bit of land.
Yeah.
So how do we start to think about how that land is managed?
Of course, yeah.
We can do it on our mapping software, it's great, but the ability to walk through that landscape virtually and understand what interventions might do could be really exciting. So they're the kind of things we're starting to look at.
Yeah.
And things like the AI Observatory allow us to just get our heads into not the horizon scanning, but what's possible now.
Yeah.
What do we need? What data do we have to collect for that to be useful for us?
Yeah.
Because it's not a case of just whacking on Google Earth. We want to know,
Of course,
what habitats. Well, that's pretty good, but what habitats are there? What are we planning on doing with it? What can we change? What can we not? Those kind of things. So that gives us a real opportunity. So that's why we went to the AI Observatory. It
looked really good.
It's so interesting. They're doing amazing work there, and they do lots of modelling for companies and that a lot of interesting work is obviously part of their research, but it was great to have a play with it.
And it's nice knowing that is now, isn't it? Today, where is it going to be? As we were saying this earlier, keeping up to date with it, of course, and where is it going to go? I think another thing you mentioned that I found really interesting. You mentioned a lot of very interesting things, but one that springs to mind is about the carbon footprint of AI. What's your thoughts on that?
Once again, not making my job easy, AI. I think it's fascinating. So I the short version is, what time is it? I could talk for hours about this. I'm not going to.
I love that though. It's so passionate.
But it is something we've all obviously given a lot of thought to. So the first thing is, it's surprisingly hard to find the true carbon footprint of this stuff. There's a lot of different versions out there. There's a lot of conjecture, but also, how do you work out the full carbon footprint? Are we just saying, for example, the carbon cost of one ChatGPT search is basically nothing. Don't worry about it. If you're on your phone doing lots of search ChatGPT and they're just text searches or image generation, they're basically nothing in the grand scheme of things. But that is kind of not the issue, because how are these models trained? There's huge data sets, there's huge data storage going on, there's the analytics, there's the creation of data centers that use a lot of water, take up land. But then it's what value is that adding? Because stuff can have a huge amount of carbon impact and be incredibly valuable. Now, I'm not saying AI is definitely that, but for example, I haven't had this conversation with anyone about the carbon footprint of Teams or Zoom. No one's asked me about that. No one's asked me about the carbon footprint of YouTube. Things where you may, and there is quite a big carbon footprint, but we've seen the value, so you don't have to have that question. You're like, well, we can deal with that having that kind of value. It's in with our digital estate. Overall, we want to make that lower, but happy days. I think because AI hasn't really proven out its value in such an obvious way, you have those questions more, where you can kind of see this kind of novelty side of it, and you can see the really big picture side of it, but a bit in the middle still feels like, if those use cases were clearer, I don't think I'd be having this conversation as much. Not to dismiss the conversation, because actually it's still well worth having.
Absolutely.
We want to make sure that we're doing the best for our digital estate, and not using over the carbon that we should be, and all other resources for it. But it is interesting to me that it's a real focus.
Yeah, definitely.
And it does obviously use a lot. I mean, we know it's the model training, we know it's the data storage and all that kind of stuff is using a huge amount of resources. So at the same time, it's the companies producing these tools that are using all the resources. It tends not to be the individual at the other end using it. But all the same, it's good to do some nice digital hygiene. Make sure you're not keeping stuff longer than you need, all that good stuff. Go and get a copy of Mike Berners-Lee, How Bad Are Bananas, book, have a look at that. There's some good stuff you should do, which is just like standard, don't keep stuff in your deleted emails folder, just delete them all, don't have multiple copies of things, send links and not, there's all these things you can do that kind of worth doing.
Absolutely, yeah.
But so I'm kind of half, if the use case is right and we can make the case, that's one thing. If there is not a valid use case and you can do it in a different lower carbon way, I mean, what we do know is it is using a lot more carbon than other stuff. Okay. So you have to kind of take that into account. So it's the no regrets thing of like, is this going to be valuable enough to be worth what we know? And that's kind of the approach we've taken, which I'd love to be more scientific about it. And I've looked at a lot of the papers, like the OECD did one about the carbon, I think it was the model training they did a little bit on. Then the MIT paper that was about the difference in certain models. There's quite a lot out there. About what it might be.
So what would you say are your biggest wins in your career so far, and any lows that you've experienced?
I think it's always hard with the wins. I'm really bad at answering these questions because I'm just like, it's always progress. It's always progress.
Yeah.
I think some of them are just seeing some of the great stuff. I mean, the Wildlife Trust do some amazing stuff. So I think when we have things like you start to output the data and see like where we're working, what's happening, what's going on across the UK. It's not my win, but it's like being able to actually visualise that and think, what does that mean for us in the future? Like, how does that make us more resilient? How does that kind of take us forwards? We've got those like the base stuff in place, like that feels like a real win because it's taken so long.
The impact you have.
Exactly. And it's like, it's not about me doing anything, it's about people on the ground being able to use it and use the data and put stuff into place. It's amazing. And I think there's a lot of like sense of hope in that as well, where you can kind of see impact of technology. Like, it's not, I'm not doing this for the sake of it, like it's fun, it's interesting, I'm really into it, but like it's about what does it actually do for other people. So that's a big one. I think the lows are always
I know,
and people get really attached to old systems that you're trying to get rid of, and that's always a bit of a low. And just like, oh, we've built something lovely, and everyone's like, I'm going to do a workaround and use the old thing, and you're just like, no. I think I'm trying to think of the lows. It was definitely some lows in terms of like, I think any time where you have to like rush something out and then redo it is always just like, oh, it always feels like the most painful. Like, it's the kind of do it fast, do it twice thing as well. Where you just like, you have to do something urgently, you put something out, you're not happy with it because you know it could be better, and then you have to redo it anyway because it's not. That always feels a bit of a low, I would say.
Thank you for sharing those. And in terms of your skills and your experience, is there anything in particular that you do to continue building on those, or is it just the day-to-day in your role at the moment?
So it's a bit of a mix. So in my data, I learn so much day to day. It's an amazing job for constantly learning new things. I'm never going to be done. And I love that. But there's a lot of like, so I mentioned that we have digital trustees at work. So I am also a digital trustee of a different charity.
Fantastic.
That's been amazing for learning. So I'm a digital trustee of the NBN Trust, which runs the National Biodiversity Network Atlas, which is where citizen science data goes in. It's a phenomenal resource. It's a great like infrastructure part of the biological recording sector. Like, my background is not biological recording. My background is, like I say, kind of more interesting problem solving stuff. But I chair their data and digital committee, for example. I learn so much from talking to other people on that committee, learning about how organisations work, learn about like what data sets they've got coming in, what are the new things that are coming through, eDNA data on there. I mean, that's amazing. You'd have thought we'd be in a world where eDNA data is like on databases. You can just go and access as a member of the public, there's 300 million records on there.
Wow.
Last year they hit 1 billion downloads.
Really?
Like, how do you deal with that? They're a small team.
That's a lot of data.
How are they doing it? And I can add value to them strategically, but I'm learning a lot about how other digital organisations work through that. So it's things like that. I do try and keep up to date with a lot of like networks and talking to people. I have digital mentors. I hugely value that. They're just like people who I can talk to, kind of sound ideas off. That's really, really valuable. I should keep up to date by doing things like coding exercises and things like that. I don't. I'll be really honest. Like, that's
Where's
the thing.
The time, though?
It falls off. It's like the bit of like my hard skills are something that I know. I know less than I did in my previous job, for example, where I was doing more focused delivery stuff. I know a bit. I know enough to have a conversation with our developer about what she's doing and how we're working together, and we can do a bit of kind of code review and problem solving. I would not trust myself to do any actual code. And that's a kind of one where I'm kind of like, I'm aware that those skills are dipping, but I'm getting upskilled in other areas and understanding what's going on, and I still know enough to be able to kind of feed that back in.
Thank you. And you mentioned there mentorship, which is something I love. I've definitely benefited from it myself over the years. And in terms of, I suppose, your younger self, is there any advice that you would give yourself now, seeing the journey that you've come on?
Yeah, I suppose to keep up your coding skills. No, I suppose it's a lot of it is like kind of leaning into some of that side, because I remember like I love working with people. I love the like relationship building, all that kind of stuff is hugely important to me. And I think I always kind of thought digital was a bit like, when I was much younger, I thought it was more kind of on the side of like, oh, it's a bit boring, isn't it? And actually it really unlocks a huge amount to have those skills, have that knowledge. That is, you know, in my absolutely unbiased opinion, like, you know, skill set for the modern world that everyone's going to need. You're going to need it regardless of the job. Like, it's great. I love the fact it is my job, but like, it doesn't matter if it is your full job title or not. You are going to need to understand this world. And I think that's something where, like, keeping an eye out for those, like, what William Gibson calls, like, you know, the kind of signals from the future. You know, what is there now that we can start to look at and go, you know, what are the next big skills going to be? Play with AI, start to look at what it works. Absolutely. What does it actually do? What doesn't it do? You know, understand the constraints, but start to play, have curiosity about it. It might not be the next big thing, or it might be, but just keeping that curiosity about things, that's the most valuable thing. But like sometimes have enough hard skills to be able to have conversations with people who have those skills. It's probably something that's like really important, that you want to be able to ask the right questions.
But you mentioned a real blend there, haven't you? It's not just one thing. It's the skills, it's the communication, I suppose teamwork, and the values that you hold in that as well. And it's a real blend of everything, not just one thing. I suppose one thing that I'd be really keen to hear is Women Digital was set up to share experiences and any advice for people looking to come into technology in terms of people looking to make this transition, or graduates or people at any point in their career. Is there any advice that you would give them where to get started?
I think, I mean, we talked about mentoring in one direction, but I also have people I mentor, like women coming into digital and tech from quite early stage. So it's something I'm really passionate about because I think it's not always obvious which route to go. And I think one of them would be, you don't, conversely to what I've just said, you don't actually always need the very, very hard skills. You need the curiosity, you need to be able to test and learn. You need to have that kind of interest in people. And that's not always seen as a really big part of it, but it's the most, like, it's so vital. You need to be able to like explain to people why this is important and work with them and see their fears, and, you know, even things like turn their needs into requirements, like understanding what people really need from you. And like, so there's a lot about working through, you know, not dismissing or underselling those other side of those skills too, because that's really, really vital for getting your foot in the door. You don't have to, don't be like, oh, I can't code, so I'm like, digital isn't for me. Like, absolutely, there'll be something you can do, whether it's like user research or content design, or, you know, there's loads of really interesting like design focused jobs. There's also loads of great, hard, interesting, they're all hard jobs, I was going to say, they're all hard, but I mean more like the kind of
different
hard
challenges,
skills of you know, background side of it, of like, you know, mapping out data architectures, things like that, like whatever you're interested in, like try and find something. But it's kind of, in terms of getting into it, it's follow your curiosity as well, of like what is guiding you, what's drawing you, you know, is there a sector, like I do not have any, like, I've got a biology A level, which wasn't great. Since then, I've done nothing to do with kind of conservation and environmental science, but I'm really passionate about the work and the values of the Wildlife Trust. But they don't need someone who's got that. They're full of people who have all those skills. What they needed was someone with the kind of skills that I have in a different area. So it's also, don't rule out organisations that you might not think of as digital, because they're going to need those skills too. So look for where it like is drawing your interest and attention, because increasingly we're going to see more digital workforce. So, you know, don't rule out kind of environmental charities as well.
Fantastic, thank you. And in terms of, I suppose, barriers coming into tech for women, have you yourself experienced any or seen any in any workplace?
It's one of those ones where I really wish that the barriers I'd experienced were not still happening to people I'm mentoring. Because I think that's one of the things where, like, I've mentored maybe, I'm trying to think how many people, maybe like 6 over the last 5 years. And at some point, the same kind of conversation comes up, which is getting talked over in meetings, not being listened to, having to kind of state your credentials a lot more as a woman. and I've done this, where you accidentally undersell yourself. Where you're like, oh yeah, I'm responsible for whatever, but you don't actually say. I find as a woman, you often have to state your credentials a bit more. Of like it took, I don't know, nearly an hour into this interview for me to go, oh, I'm a trained business process analyst or whatever.
Yes,
because we're having a conversation where we respect each other. If I'm in a conversation with someone who isn't doing that, I might have to say, by the way, I'm a trained business analyst. My background is process re-engineering and requirements engineering, and I've drawn up this data plan we're looking at.
Prove yourself more.
And I find it's those kind of things where I notice and I hear from the people I'm mentoring, they feel they have to do that a lot more. And there's a lot more of, especially if you're amiable and enthusiastic, and I am, and the women I mentor are. It doesn't mean, well, we all know, it doesn't mean that I shouldn't be taken seriously, but it can look like that because I'm not serious. I'm not, I'm very serious about the right things, but my demeanour doesn't necessarily give that off. And I think also being a woman ties into that, where it's like, just take me a little bit less seriously. And so, I've been in meetings where I've been the most senior person in the meeting, and they've spoken to a male colleague who's more junior than me, and in different meetings asked me to make the tea or whatever, which is fine, but it's not great when you're starting somewhere.
No, it's not.
And also when I've had meetings with suppliers who've explained something in a document I've sent them. I particularly like that one. Like someone kind of going, oh, do you want me to explain the API? And I'm like, oh, I actually wrote that section. So it's that where I'm just like, you see it, and I don't think, I know it doesn't happen to the same degree to my male colleagues. No. So there's just that like feeling like you have to prove yourself. And it's just a bit like, it's really tiring, and it's really tiring. I'm still having the same conversation about like tactics, approaches, how you get confident enough to kind of go, oh, actually, I was just about to say that, or I've just said that. Thanks for validating my idea, whatever it is. I think there's something, or just not. There's that famous article about women being glue, of like doing stuff that does not get you promoted in jobs. So all the like nice things that you do, and you're the one who arranges the card when someone's leaving, or you arrange, and that's great if you love doing that. Brilliant, happy days. If you don't, there is quite a lot of pressure that that's going to be you. And I've fallen into that trap completely. Is it going to get you promoted? No, probably not. In a lot of cases, it might get you liked. And that's great. Love to be liked. But so it's a proper rant. But it's really interesting that's still happening. It's the expectation on, like, especially like women with really good digital and tech skills. Let them just get on and do their technical jobs. Do you know what I mean? It's like you don't have to always have that expectation of them doing all these other stuff. They may want to. I'm not dissing anyone who wants to do that, but it's always just check whether that's being equally expected of other people in the organisation, because you basically just added to their workload.
Absolutely. You just want to be able to do the day-to-day, don't you? You don't want those challenges to come with it. What more can companies do you think?
I think an awareness of the dynamics would be helpful. I mean, a lot of companies are doing great stuff. It's fair to say. Like, I've been able to recruit brilliant data engineer into my team. She's fantastic. She's so skilled. And so it's like, and she's great. But even then we kind of see sometimes she doesn't always get taken as seriously as some other people, mainly with external suppliers, because actually the organisation I work for has a really strong EDI policy, really strong approach, really great culture of like equality and making sure it's like it's in everything. We have a great EDI team. They do brilliant work.
Yeah, you're talking about this.
Yeah, they're so good. So if you go on my LinkedIn, you can listen to the podcasts from our EDI team.
It's
so good. It's so good. Rob and Dom are amazing. They talk about all kinds of different things.
Wonderful.
So we put some of this stuff very publicly. So actually that culture is really solid, and we have a female deputy chief exec. There's a lot of women in the Wildlife Trust. I think it's about 70% women overall, which is really
positive.
High. And so that's kind of there. But I think with other companies, it's just considering kind of how things are presented, the expectations, how you're using language around of what you're expecting from staff, things like that can be quite good. And giving the opportunity, especially when you're kind of recruiting people as well. Women won't always talk up their kind of achievements as much, and just know that is potentially something you might need to kind of prompt a bit more, because we're not always socialised to do that, and the expectation is that we don't have those skills.
That's important.
So there's probably something there, but I have to say, not something I'm an expert in. I'd love it if someone could solve it. And I think we are getting there. Like, I know from the excellent women that I'm mentoring and seeing and working with, it is really coming up, and it's not seen so much as like the tech bro thing. I don't think that's helping though. The fact that Silicon Valley is run almost entirely. I can't think of one off the top of my head that's one of the big, especially AI firms, run or have visible women in them. So
visibility is important.
It's super important. I mean, you know, when you think of like, I don't want to say the word Donald Trump, but like, you know, picture of him with like the tech leaders, like that is not a diverse group of people.
Yeah.
So I think there's something there around having people all the way through your organisation as well. Like, you know, where are they?
That representation.
There's no representation. There's no seat at the table. Like, these people aren't there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I think it's one to keep a very wary eye on, because the way that the tech sector is going does not feel like that's friendly for women at all in so many ways. So I think that's one way at the moment we've got real progress. Let's not backslide on that as we kind of start to see the implications of some of this stuff come out.
Thank you. It's keeping moving forward, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Let's not go back.
Yeah, there's no complacency, unfortunately, at the moment. I don't think any of us do have that, but it definitely feels like we're going to have to be very, well, probably more visible, talk about, I mean, things like this, talk about it a lot more. Like, you know, women in digital, there are lots. Let's get the stories out there.
100%,
that's what you need to do.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Sounds really exciting, everything you're achieving and your strategy for the Wildlife Trust. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.